In this video, we're going to cover a couple of things. For one, we're going to use a scale other than the diminished scale, or oftentimes the augmented scale. As an alternative, we're going to use Ionian Sharp 5 for our action-based music. But first, we're going to go through Ionian Sharp 5, explain what it is, and then just give out general ideas on what you could possibly do to use it. For me personally, I'm always on the lookout for new ways to present certain feels. And the composition we're going to use in here was actually my first attempt at using this scale. But over the years, you'll find that writing techniques tend to cross over to different scales. So let's just cover what Ionian Sharp 5 is first. So let's just take A harmonic minor. Now, if you start the scale on the 3rd degree, that would be Ionian Sharp 5. Think of it just like you do modes. Just starting a scale on a different degree produces a bunch of different whole half-step arrangements. And it's an augmented based chord as a 1. Same chords as A harmonic minor, but now the 1 chord is augmented. And augmented chords tend to be unstable sounding, like diminished chords. So you have that never resolving kind of sound. Now right off the bat, I don't treat these scales as having to conform to any sort of rule. So you could form all kinds of what sounds like polychordal effects. They're not polychords, but they're part of the scale. And I'm not even going to bother to figure out what extensions they are. So think like pandiatonic again. Anything goes. Any chord can be played over this augmented shape simultaneously. And when you think in action, you want chaos anyways most of the time. So other things you could do, you could take your harmonic minor motifs and then use the augmented Ionian Sharp 5 root instead and still play the same thing. Reintroduce it that way, but in a less stable situation. You might take advantage of all these minor second situations that you have for like a clustery effect. You might even use it for kind of a just unsettling rising effect and then just kind of fall back. I mean, this is just experimentation at this point. Just try everything. I mean, stuff you normally might do in well, that was sloppy, but it was just taking advantage of all the minor seconds. So you might want to do an ostinato maybe. The scale is very good for tense situations, and you could also create a slight bit of mystery if you did the same thing up high like this. Which might sound good with like a Celeste kind of effect, which would give you a mysterious kind of effect. You might want to use the augmented with the major 7th and just kind of do some kind of low end thing like this. Switch Ionian Sharp 5 roots to G. Switch the roots up for a low menacing kind of effect. A really easy way to escape out of Ionian Sharp 5 would just be to go to the minor key that it's related to. So if you need to become more melodic, you could just jump to the minor key it's related to and it goes pretty smooth. So this is a super reduced version of what I'm about to play back. I did the original writing in notation and then rendered it with VSL inside of a sequencer DAW. And then here's the playback of it. So it's actually a very tremendous score, so I stuck a lot of groups into one stave, just so it fit on the screen. But in the reduction, I'm not going to do any of this tremolo kind of thing. I'm just not good at that on piano. I'm just going to go through basic ideas. And we're going to do it so slow, it's probably not going to sound in time. Opening second bar. I'm not going to try to tremolo. Passing tone is the F, okay, and then it lands on a D. So remember, you don't have to fit the harmony. And that's actually what's going to make it sound more chaotic. And there's a lot of other things happening like parallel chord runs and stuff, but I'm just pointing out the basics. So in the bar of 2/8 that we have the strings kind of just doing an arpeggiation upwards. And this is the only way to really do it on a piano, but it's just the augmented chord. Now here's something interesting about this 9/8 bar and the augmented chords. It seems like I'm planing because it's parallel, like this. But there's an interesting thing about augmented chords is they actually, it just falls downward anyways, but they actually, let's take an augmented chord, the C augmented shape, the notes of the C augmented. Well, it's the third chord of A harmonic minor, but it's also the same notes of the 3 chord of F harmonic minor, okay, as an A flat augmented. It's also the 3 chord of C sharp harmonic minor as the E augmented chord. Same notes. So at first it feels like we're planing downwards chromatically, just moving the scale down that way, but that's not what's happening. Starting on C Ionian sharp 5, just moving that down chromatically gives us G Ionian sharp 5. Moving that chromatically gives us D Ionian sharp 5. Moving that chromatically gives us A Ionian sharp 5. Notice it's a circle of fifths pattern, but there's planing. It's kind of interesting. So this is where knowledge comes in. I know that an augmented chord occurs in 3 different harmonic minor keys, so I could do this chromatic planing, but not necessarily just move the scale down chromatically. So I'll do this super slow in the 9/8 bar. Leaving C Ionian sharp 5, we go to G Ionian sharp 5. Okay. Now D Ionian sharp 5. Now there's a chromatic passing tone in there, and whatever tone you start on, it really does not matter. It doesn't have to be a chord tone. But you could use chromaticism. That's the only chromatic note I actually did use in this, and it was for compositional reasons. So on the 4/4 bar, we kind of outline the augmented shape, but an occasional F sharp thrown in there intentionally for tension. Again, use your ear. If you don't want to be that dissonant, that's fine too, but I prefer, to have some little interest in there. And chaos means chaos. It's meant to sound chaotic, so we have this just falling sequence that happens. And it keeps repeating. Basic outline of the augmented chord on A. This falling pattern happens fairly rapidly and changes different groups, orchestra groups, so very quickly. And then when it hits that E sharp, it's still part of the augmented chord. And again, we have another falling pattern, just outlining the augmented chord at this point, which is a little easier to play faster. I should have played it slower. So we're on an inversion at that point of the A augmented chord, or A Ionian sharp 5. Now as I approach the end, I kind of do this little motif thing where it sounds like it's an F harmonic minor. However, there's a little harp pedal point on the E sharp, which produces a lot of tension. It's one of the tones of the augmented chord still. And there's lots of like triple octave runs at this point, but I only threw in a couple here because I just can't put everything into this 2-stave reduction. It's meant just to show you a bunch of various ideas. So again, we have that little motif, jumps up high, but kind of using tones of the augmented chord right there. Another run, and then illusion as if we've gone to F sharp minor instead. Some kind of resolution, but there's actually no F sharp minor chord. So remember, all this area up until that very point, still concentrating on not F sharp minor chords, but the tension notes of that augmented chord over the top of other chords. I always say the easiest way to create something like this is to think in pan-diatonic terms if you know how to use that kind of music. So let's listen to it again with all this in mind. So there we go. I always encourage learning new scales, especially if you get tired of using like the diminished scale all the time and are just looking to add something more to your compositional arsenal. Well, here's another scale you can add to actually get the same kind of effect, chaotic effect, as you would with the diminished scale, but you're using a completely different set of notes and chords.